With all the tension in the South China Sea, especially between the Philippines and China, particularly regarding their disputes in the West Philippine Sea, what is the truth now? China claims that this area, which is within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, is still theirs. They justify this by citing their so-called 9-dash line. So basically, China's 9-dash line is the ultimate basis for their claim. But what exactly is the 9-dash line? Is it something that every country should know and honor? Well, today I think we should dig deeper into this matter because I have mentioned the 9-dash line many times in some of my videos, and I think it's time to clarify this line that is very controversial in the South China Sea disputes. So welcome to Grand Line Media and the 9-dash line of China.
The US, Canada and Australia have all spoken out in support of the Philippines and have been critical of China.
In the forum, Marcos warned China that the Philippines will respond accordingly.
Talked about India must be on the guard.
So the latest move also comes on the heels of G20 summit in
The 9-dash line consists of 9 lines that you can see in this region if you're using a map made by China. In other words, you can't see it on international maps made by other nations, only on those made by China. Originally, this dashed line was 11, and thus was called the 11-dash line. The 11-dash line map was published by the Republic of China on December 1st, 1947. However, in 1952, the founder of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong, decided to remove the 2 dashes located in the Gulf of Tonkin amid warming ties with North Vietnam, meaning they gifted North Vietnam this territory as a good gesture for their communist comrades. But the funny thing is, this Gulf of Tonkin was supposedly owned by Vietnam in the first place.
I smell something fishy.
Anyway, at least China is a good friend. So, based on China's history, each dash in the 9-dash line represents the range of China's claimed territory. If we look at China's map, the Spratly Islands fall within these dashes. However, the conflict arises because parts of these islands are clearly within the West Philippine Sea. So who is right? Who is the rightful owner? Well, to be honest, it is complicated to answer because if it were easy, we wouldn't have an ongoing dispute in this sea, right? But the purpose of this video is to dig deeper, to understand exactly what the 9-dash line is and whether it is a legitimate basis for China's claim. All of this started after the war between China and France. After the Sino-French War in 1885, China signed the Treaty of Tientsin with France and renounced its suzerainty over Vietnam, meaning China will now have partly rights over Vietnam. On June 26, 1887, the Qing government signed the Convention relating to the delimitation of the frontier between China and Tonkin, which did not clarify the maritime border between China and French Indochina. In other words, the agreement didn't specify which maritime territories belonged to China. The confusion became more challenging to address after Japan's defeat in World War II. After Japan's defeat, they surrendered all their conquered islands and seas, including those in the South China Sea. This surrender occurred through the Potsdam Declaration, which essentially required Japan to relinquish all territories it had acquired during its conquests. This included the total withdrawal of Japan's military from Chinese territory. However, the terms did not specify the Republic of China's sovereignty over the archipelagos and surrounding waters, meaning there was no clear statement about what China could claim. But then again, in November 1946, China sent its naval forces to claim the Paracels, Pratas, and Spratly Islands. The following year, they made their map with this 11-dash line, stating that all islands and seas within these lines were their territory starting that year. So, what was wrong with China's action? If we think about it, what China did was grabbing the opportunity. The war had ended. Japan surrendered its conquered territories, and China saw the chance to reclaim its territory. The problem was that they claimed too much. They used that opportunity to take territories that were not originally part of their maps, even before Japan conquered them. At that time, China was the only country in the South China Sea with the capability to make such an expedition, and they used that chance to claim more territories. And that was the origin of the 11-dash line, which later turned into the 9-dash line map of China. Now, based on its origin, do you think China can use that as their legitimate basis to claim the Spratly Islands? If we use common sense, the answer is obviously no.
It's common sense.
The 9-dash line is merely a visual representation of their territorial ambitions back then and even now. When Japan surrendered, those islands they conquered should have been given back to their rightful owners. Back then, the Paracels, Pratas, and the Spratly Islands had no claimants, so China claimed them instead, despite the fact that these areas were far from their mainland. But do you know what's funnier about China's dashed line? Well, they can just add another dashed line if they want to. In fact, they did just that in 2023 when they published their so-called New Standard Map of China.
India has lodged a diplomatic objection with China over a new map which lays claim to Indian territory. The so-called 2023 Standard Map of China was published earlier in the week.
Now, the controversy over China's new standard map continues to rage. Now, China has defended the move and urged India to stay objective and refrain from interpreting this issue.
I intend to make a separate video about this new standard map because I think it is a deep topic that needs a detailed documentary, especially in connection with their dashed line. In the new map, they added another dashed line, now called the 10th dashed line, which is just beside Taiwan. Of course, this action sparked more tension with some nations, especially Taiwan. Why did they add the 10th dashed line? Does it mean that they actually own Taiwan and want to show the world that Taiwan is still a province of China? In fact, Taiwan has been a separate country since 1949. But you see, China just did that. So does it mean that anytime and anywhere they can just add a dashed line and claim it as their territory? Funny, isn't it? It is no surprise why international law, especially the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, does not honor China's claim. According to UNCLOS, all the islands and living and non-living resources within 200 nautical miles of a nation's coast are under that nation's jurisdiction. So if we go to the map, the disputed areas are already far from China's EEZ, and some of them are within the Philippines' EEZ, known as the West Philippine Sea. On the 12th of July 2016, an arbitral tribunal concluded that China's claim of historic rights over the high seas has no lawful effect where they exceed the terms of UNCLOS. One of the arguments was that China had not exercised exclusive control over these waters and resources. Actually, the tribunal cannot rule on matters of territorial sovereignty. However, over 20 governments have called for the ruling to be respected, but it has been rejected by 8 governments, including the PRC and the ROC or the Republic of China. This means that China does not want to surrender its claims despite knowing that legally they are not the rightful owners of this part of the sea. But why no one can stop China? In fact, China has even built artificial islands in this sea. How come? Well, the short answer is that the Philippines is not strong enough to stop China. The long answer is that there is still no absolute law pertaining to the jurisdiction of every country in the South China Sea. Yes, we have UNCLOS, but it cannot enforce its rules on China. What we need is an absolute rule that even strong countries must follow. Without such a rule, the use of imaginary lines on maps like the 9-dash line will continue, and the confusion over territories will become harder to address. I don't think the disputes in this archipelago will be resolved soon, because the countries involved show no signs of surrendering. Hopefully, this 9-dash line will not fuel more serious tensions between these nations.